One thing you're going to need for this custom is patience, because this took some time to do. The shoes that we are going to use for these customs are the Adidas NMD XR1s. And we're going to use these specific ones because they have cages that we can cut and customize for ourselves. They're in quite a worn and beat up condition, but they're still good enough to do a custom with, though we should probably give them a little clean first. But before we do that, this is what I initially had planned for the design of these customs. I was going to use stencils to create a layout for my channel logo when you put the shoes together, like how the human races are, but I decided to scratch the idea because it might look a bit odd if you look at one of the shoes by themselves. Instead, I decided to make the text go on one shoe, but then this leaves the other side of the shoe bare. I could put the word lifestyle since it's the rest of my channel name, but I didn't have a stencil for it and I wasn't going to try hand draw the whole word in. So instead I decided to go with the 3 Adidas stripes, since this is originally an Adidas shoe we're customizing. Regarding the lacing and the cage, I decided to go with a small triangle for the cage so that the laces can wrap around the shoe human race style. And I was going to stick to a monotone color scheme of black, white and grey, which includes a blacked out boost midsole. Alright, so to clean these shoes, I'm going to be using a Jason Mark premium shoe cleaner set. It comes with a 4-ounce solution bottle and a standard brush for hard surfaces, and I also bought a separate soft bristle brush to use on the fabric of the shoes. I have this empty pump bottle that pumps out solution in the form of foam, so I'm going to be using that filled with the Jason Mark solution. Just a quick test to see if it works properly, and indeed it does, so we don't have to worry about working up a leather each time we want to clean a shoe. So we're going to give the midsole and the sole of the shoe a good clean with the standard brush to get any surface grime off, so that when we apply paint to black out the boost, it adheres properly. Initially I was going to leave the laces on because they're going to come off when we cut the cage off anyway, but in order to get a good clean, I took them off to brush underneath the cage, and we did this with a soft bristle brush. After you have scrubbed and lathered up the shoe, it's always a good idea to use a microfiber towel to clean it off because it helps lift the dirt out of the shoe. Oh, and I also decided to give the laces a quick wash as well in case I wanted to use them with another shoe in the future. So the next stage is where we're going to cut off the cage. This can be quite a slow process because you don't want to cut it in an odd shape, otherwise it's going to be more effort trying to fix it up later. Also, to prevent myself cutting into the fabric of the shoe and ruining everything, I'm just using a ruler as support behind the cage. By the way, it's also a smart idea to cut off the stitching at the end of the cage so that you will have full access to it. Okay, so the medial side of the shoe was alright, it was a bit more straightforward, but the lateral side of the shoe has some netting, so it's going to be a bit more fiddly cutting that side of the cage. But I already showed you the process of that, so I'm going to do that off camera and show you the end result. So as you can see, when all of the parts of the cages are cut, the medial side looks much neater than the lateral, and as we just said, that's because of the netting. But to fix this up, we're going to take a Dremel and smooth out the roughness. Before we get too ahead of ourselves, we'll tape up the area of the fabric near our new cage to protect it in case it gets damaged by the Dremel, and then we can start going to town smoothing out the sides of the cage. Once this is done, it should look significantly better and we'll be ready for the last step we need to take for transforming the cages, and that is to drill some holes in them. To make the hole, I'm going to use a fine point attachment to drill in an initial small hole, then use a small drill bit to drill a hole of a decent size onto the cage so that our laces can actually fit through them. Obviously it's a good idea to test the laces if they fit through once you're done, and after drilling the same size hole in all of the sides of the cages whilst using the ruler underneath to prevent any damage to the upper, we're finally finished with our new and improved cages. This next part is optional, but you can use some shoe adhesive to stick down the part of the shoe a bit better where the cage used to be. I did this off camera and let it sit overnight. So in the next part of this custom, we're going to black out the boost. We're going to start off by using some acetone to clean off the top layer of the boost so that the paint adheres properly onto the shoe, and for that I'm just using some normal nail polish remover and some cotton pads. Now to black out the boost, it's very important to do the steps exactly how I do them if you want to achieve a nice even coating that doesn't easily scratch off. Firstly, we'll be using some Angelus jet black leather dye as a base layer. The box it comes with has this little flap behind it as well, so you can place the bottle comfortably inside, reducing the risk of knocking it over. Oh, and it comes with its own applicator for the dye as well, but we're going to use the paintbrush for some better accuracy. By the way, I put a wooden shoe tree inside the shoe as well so that the fabric doesn't move about and rub against any dye or paint on the boost. Now regarding the application process, you need to take your time so that you can get a good coverage, get all the small nooks and crannies that you can with a paintbrush, so that most if not all of the boost will be covered by the dye. Now for the little details, instead of using a brush, I'm actually using a toothpick. It does long out the process quite a bit, but it ensures you won't get any paint onto areas you don't want to, which in this case is the fabric. I basically do this until the whole midsole is covered in the dye. I don't want to see any white boost at all, and I'd recommend doing 2 layers layers of this dye. After both shoes are done with that, it's time to move on to the next step, which is to apply a coat of flat black acrylic leather paint. Again, with this one, I'd recommend doing 2 layers of the paint for some solid black coverage, and you can see the actual difference doing a layer of flat black on top does as well. The black dye has a purplish undertone while the flat black has a more subdued black finish. Use the toothpick once more to go over any difficult areas of the boost, and after you let it dry for a bit, the last step of blacking out the boost is using some matte acrylic finisher. This will also help the longevity of your blacked out boost, preventing scratches to the paint so that the white boost won't show as easily. And with that said, the boost is fully blacked out and we can move on to the next step, which is colouring the cages. If you remember from the plan I drew earlier, we're going to attempt to make the cages white, and for that we're just going to use some flat white acrylic leather paint. But because it's going from essentially black to white, it's going to need a lot of layers of the white paint on it. In total, I think I did around 7 coats with some drying time in between. Oh, and I taped up the boost area as well to avoid any accidental paint marks on there. But even if we do make some accidental marks anywhere, we can just touch it up afterwards. As you can see, it came up pretty decent, and I got rid of those scuff marks that were on the cages initially as well. By the way, even though it's done in a few seconds in the video, it actually took a few hours in real life, so if you're going to do a custom like this, you have to fully commit to the painting process. And after they're done drying, we're also going to hit these with some matte acrylic finisher to avoid any scratches on our hard work. In the next step, we're going to be colouring part of the fabric of the shoe black, and for this we're going to be using 2Soft as an additive to our black paint. This will make sure the paint adheres to the fabric properly and won't leave any clumps on top. As a note, we're just going to add it to the paint with a 1:1 ratio, and I do this with a pipette to avoid any unnecessary spillages and for better accuracy. And we're going to carefully start painting the upper of the shoe black. By the way, I took out the shoe trees for this step so we can get behind the cage area so there won't be any spots that look unpainted whichever angle you look at the shoe with. After the first coat has been done, you can see how the shoe is going to be looking on this side. Unfortunately, as I was folding the fabric of the upper to try stretch out the opposite side to paint it properly, it smeared some of the black paint on the top edge of the shoe, which I initially wanted to leave its original colour, but we'll get to fixing that a bit later. I paint one more coat of black off camera so that the base colour doesn't show, and we're ready to move on to the next stage, which is going to be the main design of the upper. So I got myself some cheap stencils that spell out the word ACK, but it might be a little too big for the shoes. Even splitting them up between the shoes wouldn't look really good, so I decided to just try squeeze them all onto the right shoe and paint around them that way. But then we came across another issue. I thought these stencils were going to be sticky and stick to the shoes so that I could paint over them, but they're not sticky at all. I think I'm missing something here. If you know what it is, I beg you let me know so I can actually get to use these in the future. So for now, we're going to continue working with the design on the left shoe, and while doing that, I'm going to think up of an idea of what to do to the right shoe. So for the 3 stripes design, I'm just going to use some tape to outline the straight line of each stripe one at a time, fill it in with white paint, which is again mixed with the 2Soft additive. While I was painting them, instead of doing a harsh line to stop on, I decided to fade out the stripes as they reach the end of the shoe. Now that we've finished the stripes on the left shoe with a few layers of white, we're now going to move on to the right shoe, where I finally made my decision of what I want to do to them. We're basically going to paint the whole front of the shoe in a grey colour and mimic the stripes that we've done on the opposite shoe, but this time with black stripes instead of white stripes. By the way, a useful tip on painting the fabric of the upper is to stretch it out using your hand inside the shoe. That way when you wear the shoe on feet, there are no areas that seem like they're unpainted. Anyway, we're going to do the exact same procedure with the stripes on the right shoe that we've done to the left shoe, but of course this time with black paint instead of white. And I think they've both come out looking pretty good, to be honest. But now it's time to tackle the issue from before and fix the smearing of the paint on top of the shoe. Initially I started to paint them both white so they could match the cages on the side. However, the material just sucked up all the paint and didn't really change in colour that much. It would have taken a lot of layers of white paint to make it change its colour. So instead I had an idea, but first I wanted to use the rest of the white paint I had out to paint the rest of the original light grey areas. I painted a stripe going across the shoe so that it matches with the 3 white stripes, and I whited out the label of the shoe since it has also been smudged with the black paint and would look much cleaner with a white background anyway. For the right shoe, instead of painting the stripe that goes across the shoe white to mirror the other shoe, I painted it black to go with the 3 black stripes I had painted on the upper. I think I made the right decision because both sides came out looking quite nice. Now it's time to fix the issue on top of the shoe once and for all, and if you noticed, only the right shoe has really bad smearing with black paint on it. So I decided to paint only that one with grey to match the frontal part of the upper, and I decided to leave the left shoe as it was. After greying out the top, I'm glad I did because it seemed to have worked really well, especially with the white base coat. Now if you're doing a custom like this, you can stick with the Adidas logo, but I like putting my signature in my customs, so I decided to do just that front and center. It did look a bit plain by itself, so I decided to fill in those corners on the edges that were on the label originally. After that, they just needed a quick coat of matte finisher on the areas we just painted on, and some little touch-ups of the paint here and there. For the human race inspired lacing system, I'm just going to use some round white Adidas laces to lace both of these up with. And now you can see the shoe has fully come together. If I compare the blacked out boost of my custom to a black boost done by Adidas, you can see mine has a bit more of a shine to it, and that's because I don't have duller to add as a paint additive, otherwise it would have looked much more similar to the factory coloured boost. Just before I show you guys these properly on feet, I give them a quick spray with Jason Mark Repel to act as a shoe protectant, so that it prolongs the paint drop of the shoe and prevents it from getting too dirty when I wear them. And now you guys can take a look at the finished product. After wearing them for a bit and looking at them on feet, because they're more of a mismatched shoe, I decided to swap one of the white laces for a black one, and I think this works much better for these shoes. What do you guys think of them? I'd love to know. Drop a like to support the channel, and if you guys like these customs. Thank you so much for watching and stay blessed.